We begin in Toronto, where the Ford government tabled its annual budget. The $202 billion plan is the largest budget in Ontario history, with an emphasis on infrastructure projects and health care. Matt Ingram is live at Queen's Park and joins us now with more. Matt?
Adam, Ontario is coming into an unexpected $20 billion. Now that's because revenues for 2023 have soared much higher than expected to more than $200 billion. But despite all that new money, there's no new programs in this budget to help people dealing with the high cost of living.
I recognize the Minister of Finance.
Amid continued economic uncertainty, it's a budget the Ford government says will put Ontario on the path to fiscal balance.
It's a plan to build more roads, more highways, more transit, and more broadband.
Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy delivered the largest budget in provincial history today. It follows through on Tory promises to build more highways, hospitals, and long-term care beds, and promises money to recruit more healthcare workers.
It was pretty much a stand-pat budget. I mean, it's a typical Doug Ford budget in that it focuses on their big infrastructure projects.
Former Queen's Park correspondent Keith Leslie says the only new big-ticket item is a 10% corporate income tax credit for Ontario manufacturers, announced yesterday, but says the government really wants to highlight its healthcare spending, promising $15 billion over 3 years in addition to the nearly $4.5 billion Ontario is already getting in new federal funding.
There's been a sore point with the Doug Ford government that they weren't spending all the money they had for healthcare. This time they're showing they're going above and beyond what the feds are providing.
That money's going into things like obviously the hospital system, but it's not just about acute care. It's also about home and community care.
But $72 million next year is going to go towards private operating clinics.
And despite the unprecedented economic hardships in Ontario, no new help for struggling families.
This budget fails to meet the moment. There is nothing in here to help people who are struggling with the day-to-day cost of living.
The budget also includes the latest figures on Ontario's economic performance and outlook. The government projects Ontario will return to deficit this year, a $2.2 billion one, after posting a $2.1 billion surplus last year. It predicts Ontario will return to surplus in 2024-25. Economic growth is slowing, with real GDP projected to grow by only 0.2% in 2023, much less than the 3% previously projected. But the government says that growth will increase slightly in coming years. Sky-high inflation is projected to decrease from nearly 7% in 2022 to just over 3.5% in 2023. The unemployment rate is also declining. It averaged 5.6% in 2022, but is down to 5.2% as of January. Lots of reaction to this budget today here at Queen's Park. We spoke with a few stakeholders. Take a listen to what they have to say.
I thought it was a lovely story about a road trip. I heard about highways and I heard about the development that needs to happen. I didn't hear much about people or that we're going to have the supports in place in education that we need. If the funding is not going to keep up with or exceed inflation, we're not keeping up. In fact, we're being shortchanged again in education, and that means the students of the province will suffer.
This is a budget that's good for small business in the sense that it does no harm. There's no surprise, unexpected fee increases or costs, and that's really important as businesses are still trying to recover from COVID and then grow. There's some things in it we want to see some more details, especially the manufacturing tax credit. That looks really good at first set, but we want to make sure that enough of our members can actually benefit from it.
Well, as I heard the budget today, every now and then, I did one of these moments, only because investment is good. Investment for Ontario and the people of Ontario is really important. And we did hear about some increases in funding in areas, but of course, we represent across Canada over 800,000 members, and in Ontario alone, almost 300,000 members. And investment in public services, we didn't hear that as much as we'd like to today.
A couple other highlights I want to mention. The province is giving McMaster University $6.8 million over 2 years for its nuclear isotope reactor and research project. That's amid a global shortage of isotopes, and the government says this money will actually go to increase the supply. And one other interesting thing, cannabis revenues are actually down. Now, the government says that's not because people are buying less weed. It's actually because the government is taking a smaller share of the revenues. to help cannabis retailers.